Hello, welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my awesome big brother.
My favorite role. To you, my brother.
Toast to you. Cheers, and to you for joining us.
Our traditional sake toast.
We have lychee tonight.
Yes, lychee-flavored sake. Yeah, I like that. There's a lot of different kinds of that.
So welcome to our weekly forum to talk about all things sex and sexual health and good sexual health information, because there is a dearth of it on the internet.
Indeed. So we appreciate you taking the time on your Friday night, or whatever night you might be joining us. But Friday night is the time we like to kick off talking about sex. Right? However, as we do like to point out, every night should be a night that we devote to talking about sex. This should be part of our regular conversations. Right? It's even with kids, not just our partners, but even with our kids, it should be a regular thing that we talk about. Again, appropriate for age, appropriate for where they are, but we have to stop kind of shocking ourselves, with the fact that, there is this thing called sex, and people have it.
Sex talk shouldn't be a single event.
Yes.
Like awkward and embarrassed sitting at the kitchen table, usually too little, too late.
Right.
Sex talk is an ongoing part of life.
Indeed. And it's people talk. It's not talking about anything weird or bizarre. It's talking about how we become and act as we are, as men, as women, as whatever other identification we have that defines us as the people we are. That's really what talking about sex is about.
Yeah, we've got to avoid going right to the crotch and thinking about genital acts when we talk about sex and sexuality.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing how the people that seem the most resistant and the most uncomfortable when it comes to sex talk are just incredibly obsessed with genitals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly an obsession. Right? So it's kind of ironic.
There's some on the surface psychology there.
Indeed. So if you are new to the show and to the channel here, please hit that like button, subscribe, and kind of join us in this sort of weekly stroll down sexual conversations and important sexual topics.
We'd love to hear your comments and feedback, questions, and topics you'd like to hear us talk about.
Indeed. So, before we kind of jump in and start, anything new and exciting that we should sort of think about as we're heading toward the holidays?
Yeah, hopefully we don't end the year with a nightmare of sexual politics and judges climbing up women's uteruses.
Indeed. And if I may make a little plug for something we feel very, very strongly about, we've talked a lot on this show about some of the politics around abortion laws and the state of abortion. And it's not really about abortion. It's about whether or not women can be counted as human beings who have control and any kind of decision-making power over their own bodies.
Not just incubators.
Right, not just incubators. So, the pitch that I want to make is, as we've been talking about for a while, men have to step up a little bit more here. We've got to look at all reproductive health issues, all sexual health issues as being just as relevant and important to men as we make them out to women. And stop this idea that, well, it's a woman's body, so therefore it's her responsibility. No, it is our responsibility as well. Right? Just because we're not the ones that get pregnant, right, does not mean that we have no responsibility in that pregnancy occurring.
Absolutely.
So we do have to have a better job, and there's been a lot of stuff coming out, and I want to echo this question about where are all the men in these discussions and dialogues. We want to hear from you.
Except for the really old conservative white ones usually, except Justice Thomas. except for these ancient old guys,
Mm-hmm.
no men are talking about abortion.
Right.
Except to eliminate
Right.
it and
Right.
make sure women don't have access to it.
Right. So, guys, we've got to make ourselves heard. Right? You know, and this is true, I think, across the board. Like I said, with sexuality and reproductive health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, we're going to focus tonight on a particular male issue when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, but this should not be the only time where we focus on men.
Right, and even this topic, you know, I think just identifying it as a topic is part of the problem
Yeah.
with men and their view of sexuality in general, right? And that is erectile dysfunction, which even in, like I said, in naming it, it underscores the undue focus that the vast majority of men have on sex as performance.
Right.
Rather than the mutual sharing of pleasure.
Right. And I can say, even if we sort of allow for selfishness, right? You know, be selfish with your own sexual pleasure, right? Even if you're not, you know, focused on pleasuring your partner. Focus on your own pleasure, experiencing your own pleasure. But sex is still not an experience for most men. It is still about performance.
Right. And it's another job.
Yes.
That you have to show up right and do well, and you know, to succeed, the guy's script says he has to be big enough and hard enough and last long enough, and you better not finish too quick, and you better not take too long. And most guys end up working more than they're playing.
Right.
And as I'm fond of saying, it's only sex work if you're getting paid for it.
That's right.
And even sex workers should be allowed to enjoy the sex they're having.
Indeed.
But when guys are so, like, it's often a full-blown anxiety panic attack. When a guy's having intercourse and he feels his erection lagging, there's this kind of, panic. And of course, we call it, therapists love to call this spectatoring, when we run up into our heads and are watching ourselves critically, like, what are you doing? Don't, like a coach with a clipboard and a whistle. Guys are especially, I mean, women do it too, but guys are especially bad because it's about that performance. And once a guy gets into that panic, he's in effect guaranteeing that what he's afraid of happening is going to happen.
Yeah.
Because, you know, part of what contributes to erection problems, or as our friend in California, Chris Donahue, likes to say, erectile disappointment rather than dysfunction, has a lot to do with anxiety.
Yep. Yep. You know, and I'm even going to take a little issue with the term erectile disappointment. I think, you know, more generally, there are erectile issues that men experience. And if we understand what normal functioning is, how the body really works, which is a lot more inconsistent than most people realize it is, then we can spare even a lot of those disappointments. That we can accept the reality of what's happening in the moment and let's do something else. Right? I mean, again, one of the things that I've been
sex doesn't have to grind to a halt just because an erection goes from here to here.
Right. And again, one of the things that I've been fond of saying for most of my career is that men as lovers, as sex partners, however you want to describe it, we're so much more than just a penis. And if guys think the only thing that makes them lovers is their penis, I think that's kind of, it's a little sad. It's a little, let's just say, a lack of creativity.
Yeah, and guys cheat themselves out of enjoying sex.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of that unwritten script that's just filled with myth and misinformation. Most guys don't even understand female sexual response. And don't really know what a woman is experiencing. You know, even if guys are looking at porn, if a woman's moaning and screaming and writhing, he doesn't know what she's feeling.
Right.
Even if he probably on some level knows that it's a performance, right? And there's acting going on, and right, that's a whole other subject about you know, that sexist difference between women faking orgasms usually to protect guys' egos.
Yeah.
But you know, that script that says get it up and get it in and move it back and forth until the magic happens, and then, you know, job well done, you can check off a success. and then he can finish, right? Like, God forbid, he has his orgasm before she does.
Oh, that's it. But selfish bastard.
With straight couples, that also usually leads to grinding to a halt and somebody being pissed off.
Yeah.
And, you know, that till the magic happens, what do guys think is going on? Unless they understand women's sexual anatomy, and by the way, you know, as an aside, all of us, males and females alike, have our sexual parts on the outside, right? It's not like the sexual / reproductive, like women's anatomy is all about ovaries and uteruses and fallopian tubes. Sexual parts, penises, clitorises, are on the outside of our bodies.
Absolutely.
Right? But most guys are not informed, either don't know or don't want to know, or, right? They think that magic, moving back and forth, like there's not much in the vagina for most women that are going to respond only to that.
Right.
Right?
Right. And let me also throw in as kind of a caveat that we're focusing more on heterosexual dynamics, just because, again, the numbers are greater and that's where we see more men experiencing erection problems. But men who are having sex with other men can also often experience erectile problems. Trans men can experience arousal problems. I mean, there's just so many trans women who often still have their biological appendage and use it, you know, like anybody uses a sex organ, can experience difficulties as well, right? So, you know, even though our focus is going to be more in heterosexual dynamics, we have to look at that this is, again, men experiencing this regardless of who their partner is. Because we can even add that extra step in there that some men experience performance anxiety and inability to get erections even when they're by themselves, even when they're pleasuring themselves.
Although that's often an important diagnostic clue, right? To help, sometimes it's the job of the sex therapist or whoever a patient is presenting to with this kind of complaint, is to find out, you know, some qualifiers. Is it all the time or just in certain situations? And that's one of the clues, right? Most guys who report erection problems with partners because of that anxiety don't have problems by themselves. If a guy, especially like around our age, reports difficulty even by himself, I would want to be on the lookout for those kind of physical causes.
Absolutely.
And usually there's this perfect storm of metabolic factors. The guy's kind of paunchy, overweight, and hypertensive, probably pre-diabetic, smokes, eats crappy food. You know, you got a good bet.
Right. Actually, what we call metabolic syndrome now.
Yeah. Which contributes. But if you have a healthy 28, 30-year-old guy who says, you know, every time he tries to have intercourse with his wife, he loses his erection, but it never happens with his secretary, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to guess that there's nothing wrong with the equipment. Well, this equipment is involved. So again, a lot of the advertising, a lot of the this is easy to fix, just send away for our special pills, are problematic because, well, for a lot of reasons, right? Guys think it's the pill that's doing it for them. And as we'll talk about, most of the treatments for what's now come to be known as ED, instead of the old term we used to use, impotence, right, which is a horrible blow to a guy's fragile ego. You know, people still think of drugs like Viagra and Cialis like they're aphrodisiacs, like they make a guy horny and excited and aroused. And these drugs are like plumbing things. They open channels on microscopic cell walls and, you know, allow the exchange of gases so blood flow can cross and get an erection. But still, since 1998, when Viagra was approved, and like so many other drugs, it was a side effect that was discovered, right? It was being evaluated for something else, for
blood
use
pressure
as a cardiac for angina, right?
Angina and blood pressure.
And they found, especially among older guys participating in clinical trials, who were quite surprised to see erections after going a long time without seeing them. And since 1998, that's a long time already, and still, there's still this reputation that these drugs will just give a guy an erection.
Give you an erection.
Just like, Jack and the Beanstalk, throwing the beans out in the yard, and next morning there's a big stalk there, or in 45 minutes. Guys still think that it makes them horny. Partners, there's still a lot of issue in the comfort around using these kinds of medications. Still a lot of fear and misinformation about side effects.
Right. So let's go back and let's look at this from the beginning. Right. I want to first start with, we're talking about these are treatments for men who identify as having erectile difficulty or erectile problems. So what does, first of all, normal erectile or typical erectile ability really look like? Is it from the time you first become aware of your erections until the time you die? Is it normal, and I'm using that word, for men to basically just have erections on demand?
Well,
Because I think that's an expectation.
Right.
That goes into a lot of this stuff.
I think
too.
that's part of the sexual script, that erections are like mandatory equipment that guys have to show up with in order for sex to work. Instead of, again, like everything else, erections are a result of arousal, right? They're not prerequisite equipment.
Right. And I think it's also important to remember that at any age, whether you're in your 20s or you're in your 90s, every guy at some point, actually at several points, are going to want to get an erection and will not be able to.
Right.
And that in and of itself does not mean there's a problem.
Right.
If it is a repeated pattern and we see that there is, I'm going to use the word continuity in that, then we need to look at that as an issue. But if it happens once in a while, on occasion, that's the way it's supposed to work. Right? That's normal functioning. Right? So again, we look at a lot of the things that are advertised, all of these boner pills that used to be on TV. Like every commercial round, there was just this whole slew of boner pills. They couldn't call them boner pills.
A lot of people haven't noticed that they disappeared, right, around the early 2000s. All of those, every joke and innuendo for small, limp penises was used in those commercials. There was the Enzyte was probably the biggest, and Enzyte Bob with his big swing of confidence. All the neighborhood ladies wanted to be around Bob.
That's right.
And then there was Extends and Vasomax, all of these different drugs.
Right. Now the thing is,
claims to,
what did they claim?
To grow erections.
Nope.
Well, no, they
No.
had a unique
This is
marketing.
why we don't see them anymore.
No, but you'd think this is why they would have gotten away with it, right? Because all they really offered was natural male enhancement.
Exactly.
That was the phrase.
That's right.
And if you try and break that down, it means nothing.
Right.
Right? Except that, well, natural, it must be better for you than nasty chemicals and drugs because it's natural. Male must mean penises because, like you just said, what else is there to us? And enhancement must mean...
bigger and better.
Right. But natural male enhancement.
Okay. But to your question, that should have been enough. Why was that enough? because that's why we don't see them anymore. Because this is historic.
Claims.
These were historic campaigns. And the reason we don't see them anymore is because the first time companies were getting into trouble, not for what they actually said, but what they were obviously implying.
Yeah.
And they all also came along with scam, automatic ordering that you couldn't get out of, and they kept charging and billing and all that kind of stuff.
Even the stuff they're selling now, like this eugenics. Nugenics. With retired athletes talking about losing their testosterone after 40. They're still implying
That's right.
that these magic ingredients
That's right.
they claim are proprietary.
That's right. That's right.
Is going to do the trick, and they even throw in a little heterosexist dig there, a little line at the end of every one of those commercials. They say, "She'll like it too." Wink.
Right. And there's always that woman sitting there go,
It's so silly. Why are you so
really
silly?
is. Right? Now, first of all, there is
Promises.
nothing over the counter that will help a man's sexual performance. Right? There's nothing available that'll do that. You know, the active ingredient there, testofen, in that Nugenics, is nothing more than an old herb called fenugreek, very popular in a lot of Middle Eastern and Indian type of cooking. Now, there is some research clinically that shows that fenugreek does have an impact on testosterone, but the biggest bit of misinformation out of all of this stuff is that we can judge how we feel, we can have any connection to our sexual performance by our testosterone levels.
Right.
Like that means something.
Yeah.
Right? There's not an
That's a
endocrinologist
big
alive
problem.
that actually can explain what that means.
That's a big problem.
It really
yeah,
is.
and sex therapists unfortunately fall for it too. When there's a question about a guy's arousal or response, the first thing is, did you get his testosterone checked? And like, well, why?
Right. Well, free testosterone, bound testosterone, early morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. What
a
about the binding
complicated
things?
assessment. Right.
I mean, it really is. There's
Yeah.
no way to measure it, and there's no standard of function related to testosterone. But what we do have are pharmaceutical products. Right? These group of drugs that you started to mention, starting with 1998,
Right.
with Viagra. There's a group of drugs called Pde5 inhibitors, right? Which basically just mean that these drugs prevent an enzyme that stops a reaction, which then allows that reaction to go even further. Now, what is that reaction?
As I said before, blood flow across
Yeah.
cell membranes.
Yeah,
Right.
basically
It's
that's
a gas.
really is.
Nitric oxide, not to be confused with nitrous oxide, the laughing gas that you get at the dentist or in the parking lot at fish shows. This is nitric oxide, which is not psychoactive.
No.
But it's just a simple, very simple gas that moves across cell membranes and then triggers the production of, what is it, cyclic GMP? I don't remember
Yeah.
my college organic
Yeah,
chemistry.
but again, what it does is it directs blood flow into the extremities, in this case, the penis.
Right, the spongy tissue.
Right? And that's what an erection is. Another thing that most guys don't quite understand. We use words like hard on, but there's nothing hard in a penis. Right?
Well,
the penis
I
is a
mean-
series of tubes within tubes.
right, like
Right.
boxes of balloons. Steve Snyder describes it as, right? And they fill with blood, and the pressure against the boxes causes it to harden.
Right.
And, you know, that's kind of important if you're trying to make a baby. But as Marty Klein likes to say, just to cause those brain cramps, intercourse is the only sexual activity that requires an erection.
That's right. And erections are only necessary for penetration, not for pleasure.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean-
and that's where the script is
Right.
flawed.
Exactly.
That guys get.
So these PDE5 inhibitors, we have a couple of them now. We have Viagra, we have Cialis, we have Levitra, and we have Stendra. And there's a couple of others that are just different
Yeah.
brands,
Right, of the same
different brand
drugs.
names of they're all the same drugs. And they're all pretty much Coke, Pepsi, Royal Crown Cola. I mean, they're all different variations of the same thing.
Right.
Right?
I remember how terrified guys were. Well, of course, they required a little explanation to find out why they should be terrified about those warnings at the end of the Viagra
Yeah.
commercials about erections lasting more than 4 hours. Right? And while people might want to
Called priapism.
make jokes about that, women have made jokes about that. The truth is, it is medically dangerous because, as we know, blood that stops moving clots. And so a guy
And dies.
with a penis full of clotted blood, that's a medical emergency.
Exactly.
Right? So guys got that explanation, realized it's not good to have your penis full of blood for more than 3-4 hours, and realized that it was dangerous. And then Cialis came out, and they talked about this drug lasts for 36 hours. And guys freaked out thinking, wait a minute, you told me a 4-hour erection is dangerous. Now I'm going to run around with an erection for a day and a half? And no.
But it wasn't quite like that. It wasn't that they would have an erection for 36 hours.
It's just that the drug is on board, right?
Right.
Cialis stays in the body longer than Viagra does. Viagra has a quicker onset, and then it does what it does and it wears off. Cialis lasts the whole weekend, right? But it's, like you said, Coke and Pepsi. They're variations on the same theme. They just have different durations.
Right. And with most of these drugs, you need to take them, they're situational kind of drugs, which means if you're going to be having intercourse, you take the drug right before it. At a certain time, like an hour and a half or 2 hours before you're ready for intercourse. But Cialis is different because they offer a low dose every day that you can take. It's a 5 milligram dose. Men take it every day. You don't have to wait till you have intercourse. So this way, there's always some in the system that keeps it on board. Right? Now, again, that's also something that if guys are taking, they need to tell their doctors about because that can interact with other types of medication. Right? Now, another sort of myth we need to dispel about these drugs, these Viagra-type drugs, is that, like you said, they don't give spontaneous erections. And despite what a lot of these websites now, right? There's a bunch of these websites where guys can discreetly order medication for their balding heads as well as medication for their erections. And a lot of them will guarantee success.
That's problematic. Yeah, there's a
very
website called HIMS where they say, get hard or your money back. And first of all, like all those other drugs, I wonder how easy it is to get your money back. I think they kind of count on the fact that most guys are going to be too embarrassed to say, your wonderful miracle boner drug didn't even work, so me and my soft penis want our money back. No, you're right. Guys take the pill and forget how to have an erection, and they just wait, right? They watch, they watch their watch, they watch their crotch, and then again the anxiety is building. Like, wait, nothing's happening. It's been 45 minutes, and they need to get a message from whoever has given them that Viagra script. Their urologist, their general practitioner, whoever needs to remind them that the same way they got an erection before Viagra, that's how they have to get an erection with Viagra.
Exactly.
In other words, friction and fantasy.
And you know what? Unfortunately, most medical doctors do not give any real instructions for medication. It's basically, here, this will do it,
go.
See ya.
Enjoy.
Right? Not talking to the partner, not creating the context, and like you said, that everything you need to get an erection without these drugs are the same things you need to get an erection with these drugs. Right? Now, there's far from a guarantee. Clinically, in terms of actual statistics, when we look at the number of men who they're called, like, you know, they started to be called Viagra failures. But when we look at the number of men that just do not respond to these medications, it's a significant amount. It's about 30%. And that's what's reported, which kind of always says to me, it's more.
Well, we know a couple of urologists we've done trainings with that say that as like half of the scripts they write don't get refilled.
Right. And that's a telling.
Right. Most people might think, how do you fail with taking a pill, right? Open your mouth, put one in, swallow. That it's not that complicated. But there are a couple things to keep in mind. Right? Like, again, it's not going to do it for you. Guys should be instructed to take the pill, kind of forget about it. Maybe take care of cleaning up the kitchen or something, and then seduce your partner. But there are things that he needs to know. Right.
But you know what? All things being equal, even if the guy does everything he's supposed to, 30% failure rate. It's just a lack of effectiveness in all of these men.
It goes back to that anxiety that doesn't get addressed. That anxiety is stronger than Viagra. And if anxiety is going to kill an erection, it'll be stronger than Viagra's ability to
Yes.
cause one.
Yes, but I think you still have a little sense in there that it's supposed to work all the time, and it doesn't. Right?
Right.
That's where we see the failure rate. So even
Yeah.
when guys are using it correctly, guys don't have the anxiety, there's still a significant number of men it's just not going to work for. But there are other options that guys have as well.
Well, yeah, if these drugs are tried, and again, I want to point out these factors that these are kind of user error, that
Okay.
Not using it as instructed, right, or as it should be used. This is based on Michael Perlman's research, that out of a group of 50 guys, 45 did not use the highest recommended dose and then complained that the drug didn't work. I think there's a lot of fear. Sometimes guys worry. Maybe it's these side effects. Maybe they have had side effects in the past, and so they're a little...
Even doctors
hesitant.
prescribing often don't want to start with the highest dose. Let's try this and see how you do.
Especially now these generics and these companies online are prescribing like 10 milligram increments instead of a 50 milligram pill. 32 out of 50 use the drug after eating a heavy meal. And again, it's kind of counterintuitive. If you're taking a drug, you don't want to eat a half a pan of lasagna. That's going to slow the absorption of the drug and make it not work.
Guys, on sex nights, light meals are better.
Salad and a glass of wine, not a bottle. 22 out of 50 guys use the drug right before initiating sex. So again, it's like taking the pill, say, okay, let's go. The pill needs time to
30
get
minutes
into
to
the
just
system.
absorb, just to break down before it even goes where you want it to go.
As we're saying, a significant portion used the drug without any sexual stimulation and wondered why there was failure. And then a lot of guys used the maximum dose even when they were medically instructed not to, when it was contraindicated either
Absolutely.
from some cardiovascular problems, blood pressure problems. Right.
And again, Viagra and none of these drugs will fix relationship problems or anxiety problems or depression problems. You know, again, we have to look at the context for all of this stuff as well. So, this is far from a totally effective. I mean, it works for, we would say, most men, but there's a significant number of men that don't do, as you were just pointing out, not using it properly, but even those that do can still experience the lack of effect.
Right.
So again,
So
Viagra
the
is
next-
not the panacea. It's
That's
not an answer to
these
everything.
drugs are the first line of treatment, but as you said, not always effective. And so when they fail, the next thing is usually injections, right?
Right.
But guys need to don't get that mental picture of thinking of, well, first of all, the word injection and penis in the same sentence.
Kind of hard not to picture that.
But it's not like, a needle and syringe and right? They're like these spring-loaded
Yeah, almost like
things,
those
kinda hold
the
up
thigh
next
pop
to-
kind of.
Hold up next to the penis and hit a button and it goes in along the side.
Still putting a needle in your penis.
But they're very well tolerated.
Yes.
And
Yes, and very effective.
yeah,
Right.
they cause an instantaneous erection, like I think 99+% of the
Right.
time.
But it's time limited. You got to time it right.
Yeah.
Right?
Didn't you
It
have a
lasts
guy,
for 60 to 90 minutes. Yes,
Didn't you have a
I
guy
did.
get stuck in traffic?
I can't make this up. I literally had a case where a guy was trying that. He goes to his doctor's office. He shows him how to do it. The first shot you get in the doctor's office, and he got his erection, and he lived 10 minutes away, and he got out of the doctor's office, called his wife, said, honey, I have a surprise for you, got on the road and was stuck in traffic for the next hour and a half. So by the time he got home, it had already worn off. There was no more erection. She's like, yeah, where's my surprise? It's like, left it in the car.
Yeah.
So the timing is important. But even some guys just can't get over the idea of putting a needle in their penis, even though you're right, it's not what it sounds like, but it's still injecting into your penis. A lot of those same drugs Right? And the drugs that are used for these injections, the two most common one are Bimax and Trimax, which are either 2 or 3 drug combinations, right? Phentolamine, papaverine, and alprostadil. And the Bi or Trimax is 2 or 3 of those. But there's also something called Muse that, I mean, I can't believe it's still being used, but it is still. It is.
I thought that was a dinosaur
No,
already.
no, it is still being used, which is a urethral suppository.
That means like taking something that looks like a grain of rice and sticking it down in your pee hole, and it has a little plunger to push it down.
That's right.
And then a guy's instructed to rub his penis like this until it melts, and does the same thing as the shot.
Right. It's a local active.
Right. Most guys prefer the shot.
Right. Well, because there's also a lot of irritation. There are a lot more. And again, this may sound weird.
From
for
what
a lot
I've
of
heard,
people,
it hurts like hell
but there are
sticking something in your urethra.
Yeah, there's a lot more side effects with putting that in your urethra than putting a needle in there. It's doing the shot. Yeah. Far fewer effects and side effects. And also the shots are much more
as well. The shots can cause scar tissue.
Yes.
If
it's overdone, which is why, again, it's only once in 24 hours. Right? So again, the timing and all of that, and does you give up some spontaneity? Yes. Right? But most people really don't care about that. There are also implants, right? These penile implants for guys with vascular or nervous system damage.
Pretty high tech nowadays.
They really are.
Like the Air Jordan of implants.
That's right. There used to be, right now the two main kinds. One's called the semi-rigid, which is just sort of a soft tube that goes through the penis. And it's always kind of semi-hard. It's hard enough for penetration, but not hard enough to get in the way, but it has a little hinge, right? So when you don't want to use it for intercourse, you just kind of bend the hinge down a little bit, and it's kind of out of the way. When you do want intercourse, you kind of pop the hinge up, and you're good to go.
If anybody's old enough to remember Gumby dolls, it's like that metal wire inside the rubber that you can move.
But the ones that they use now, again, kind of high tech and sort of really cool. They basically have these two, plastic rods that go into the shaft of the penis. The tubes that go into the shaft of the penis, and there is a reservoir that's filled with saline, and there's a little pump, and the reservoir is put in sort of out of the way. Down in there, and when a guy wants to have an erection, he just hits the pump. It's like Air Jordans. You press that a couple of times, the fluid moves into those tubes, you get an erection, and when you're done, you hit the release valve, and the fluid then goes back into that reservoir. And these things have like a 98% satisfaction rate, especially with partners. Right? Now, it's surgical. It's expensive, but most insurances do cover it. And you have to really be committed to this, because this is not reversible.
Like you said, but the satisfaction rate is high. So for older guys, usually again advanced diabetes, cardiovascular disease. These are the guys that get these implants. And if they're still sexually active, and if it's the quality of life issue that's important to them, they should be.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, you said insurance covers them, right? Because, again, men need not ever be denied their God-given right to erections on demand. But
that's right.
Women can't get birth control paid for by insurance companies. But boners, sure. Even I remember when Viagra was first approved, it wasn't until there was complaints that they stopped. Even poor guys on welfare were getting like 2 Viagra pills a month.
But they wouldn't cover birth control pills for women.
You're right, because that's elective. Why should we cover that?
And it kind of, now if you think about it, look at where we're going to be headed here. We have that insurance companies will cover Viagra, but they won't cover birth control, and now abortion's illegal.
Yeah. How many benched penises are being brought back into the game? Potential baby makers.
Right.
And
Now, other options available to guys are what we call wearable treatments, wearable devices. The old version is the old, I'll use the word penis ring,
Yeah.
right? Which basically is like just a ring. It compresses. You put it around when a guy gets an erection, it goes around the shaft. And basically what it does, the idea behind it is to, see, when a guy gets an erection, arteries direct blood flow into that erectile tissue, into the penis. And when that penis becomes erect, when it's filled with blood, it presses down on a vein underneath.
Or up.
Right?
Or
Well, presses up on the vein, right. On the vein underneath, which prevents the blood from flowing back out.
Right.
Now, the problem with a lot of those penis rings is it also presses against the arteries and can interfere with blood flow going into the penis. So this new device that's out there now called, I don't want to get into, you owe me a royalty for saying this, but this Eddy type of device, which is kind of like a penis ring. Right? It's not a full circle, kind of, is a little bit open on the bottom, but it's got a little sort of, I don't even know, a nub, all right, on the top of it, so that it's only pressing against the vein, not the arteries. So once that blood flows into the penis, it can stay there without leaking back out and losing the erection until they take it off.
Right. Remember, there's two kinds of erection issues, especially as guys age, right?
Right.
There's the getting and the keeping.
Right, right.
So a lot of guys complain they have trouble getting erections, and a lot of guys get them and complain they have trouble keeping them.
Yep. And then there's the last option, not a third, we've been already way more than three, but the last option is relatively new and pretty controversial. And that is using shock, what they often call shock waves, but acoustic waves, sound waves, along the shaft of the penis. And it can be very effective, and this but kind of comes around and it really applies to all of these kinds of issues as well. It depends on, it only works for one kind of erection problem. Guys can get erection problems, physical erection problems, either because the blood vessels themselves get weak or get damaged. Veins have valves in them, right, which is what allows that blood to move up against the force of gravity. They get weak, they can leak out. There's also neurological damage. There's also other types of damage that can occur. So these acoustic treatments are only effective for vascular erectile problems.
Yeah, and I'm suspicious. I still think it remains to be seen if these things are going to prove to be effective or not.
Right.
They're certainly popular in marketing, and somebody's making money, but I don't know. We'll see.
Right. But it's really, really important that if a guy is experiencing any kind of consistent issue or problem getting or maintaining an erection, you do see a professional, you do work with somebody, you get tested. Right? Because again, you just can't say, oh, well, you're not getting an erection when you want to, so here's a treatment. No, treatment has to be specific to the kind of erection problem a guy has. Right. And again, we're only talking about things tonight that are going to be effective with what we call organic or physical erection problems. None of these things are going to fix your relationship. None of these things are going to make your partner more attractive to you. None of these things are going to eliminate your resentment that you may have, or your stress, or your fatigue. Right? So we really do have to look at and do the investigation to find out, where is this erection problem coming from? Is it in this head or is it in this head? It's sometimes it's a combination of both. Right? But like you said, if a guy has trouble getting an erection with his spouse, but not with the person that he's cheating on them with, it's not a physical problem. Yeah. If a guy cannot get an erection with any partner, but he does wake up in the morning with an erection, it's not a physical problem. Yeah. Right? So, I think this tendency to oversimplify erection problem, we overemphasize and we oversimplify. And that's not a very good combination for effective and healthy connection to our penises.
Yeah. Guys would be better served to talk to someone, even if it means a couple of sessions, than going online and buying some crap that promises to make them a super stud.
Right, right. And don't be fooled by those promises, right? If it does sound too good to be true, it is.
Yeah.
All right. So again, just because one works for these guys doesn't mean it'll work for you. Right? So that's why really kind of doing it right is important.
Okay, let's wrap it up there for this week.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us for this. Again, if you have any further questions or anything more to add, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Right? So send us your comments, send us your question. If there's anything you would like us to talk about, we'd be happy to do that.
So we'll be back next Friday and every Friday at 7 East Coast time on YouTube for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.